The rhythmic tapping of raindrops against the windshield was the only company Jack Lawson had as he drove home from his second job at nearly midnight, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel of his 15-year-old Honda Civic that protested with each puddle he drove through. His eyelids were heavy, but the thought of his 6-year-old daughter Sophie, sleeping peacefully at his neighbor Mrs. Henderson's apartment, kept him alert enough to notice the hazard lights blinking frantically on the deserted stretch of road ahead. Jack slowed his car, squinting through the rain-streaked windshield. A sleek black Mercedes had pulled off to the side, its front passenger tire completely flat. Standing beside it, illuminated by the car's hazard lights, was a woman in a business suit, holding her phone with a frustrated expression that was visible even through the downpour. He hesitated for only a moment. At 34, Jack had learned that life rarely offered second chances, and kindness was something he could still afford to give, even when his bank account was perpetually overdrawn. He pulled over, grabbed his worn jacket, and stepped out into the rain. "Need some help?" He called out, approaching cautiously so as not to startle her. The woman turned, relief washing over her features. "Oh, thank goodness. My phone's dead, and I haven't seen another car for almost 20 minutes. As Jack drew closer, he noticed her expensive-looking outfit was now completely soaked through. Her dark hair clung to her face, and despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but notice she was strikingly beautiful. "I'm Jack," he said, extending his hand. "Flat tire." "Emma," she replied, taking his hand briefly. "Emma Zhao, and yes, I hit something back there and now I'm stranded. I was trying to get home from the airport." "Well, Emma, you're in luck. Changing tires is one of my many talents," Jack said with a tired smile. "Do you have a spare?" Emma nodded, gesturing toward the trunk. "The car manual says it's under there, but I couldn't figure out how to access it. Let me take a look. You can wait in my car if you want stay dry." She shook her head. "I've already gotten as wet as humanly possible. Besides, I should learn how to do this myself." Jack nodded appreciatively as he moved to the trunk. There was something refreshing about her attitude. "Fair enough. First lesson in tire changing 101, getting the spare out." For the next 15 minutes, Jack worked efficiently in the pouring rain, explaining each step as Emma held his phone flashlight. She asked smart questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the process, which surprised him. Most people he encountered with cars this expensive typically called their roadside assistants and waited in comfort. "So what has you out driving in this weather so late?" Emma asked, as Jack tightened the lug nuts on the spare tire. "Just getting off my second job," Jack replied, focusing on the task. "I bartend 4 nights a week after my construction gig. 2 jobs, that sounds exhausting," Jack shrugged. "It's what needs to be done. My daughter Sophie is worth every minute." "You have a daughter?" Emma's voice softened. "Yeah, she's 6, smart as a whip and twice as quick." Pride crept into his voice despite his exhaustion. "She's staying with my neighbor tonight, which reminds me I should probably wrap this up." As Jack finished securing the spare tire, Emma insisted on helping him put the flat tire and tools back into her trunk. Their hands brushed momentarily, sending an unexpected jolt through Jack's rain-chilled body. "There we go," he said, closing the trunk. "That should get you home, but you'll want to get a proper tire soon. That's just a temporary spare." Emma nodded, rainwater dripping from her chin. "I can't thank you enough, Jack. Most people wouldn't have stopped." "Most people haven't needed someone to stop for them before," he replied simply. An awkward silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of rain and passing cars. "Look," Emma said suddenly, reaching into her purse. "Please let me pay you for your time." Jack raised his hands, backing away slightly. "No need, really. Please, I insist. You saved me from a very uncomfortable night." "How about this?" Jack said, surprising himself. "If you really want to thank me, there's a coffee shop called Beans and Books on Maple Street. You can buy me a coffee sometime." The words had tumbled out before he could stop them. Jack hadn't asked anyone out since his ex-wife had left 3 years ago, claiming she hadn't signed up to be a struggling family. Now here he was, soaked to the bone, asking a woman who clearly lived in a different world to have coffee. Emma studied him for a moment, raindrops clinging to her long eyelashes. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled a genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "I'd like that," she said, pulling out her phone. "Let me give you my number." After exchanging contact information, they said their goodbyes and returned to their respective vehicles. As Jack watched Emma's taillights disappear around the bend, he shook his head, wondering what had possessed him to ask her out. Women like her didn't date men like him, men who counted pennies to make rent and worked themselves to exhaustion just to provide the basics. Yet as he drove to Mrs. Henderson's to pick up Sophie, he found himself hoping she would actually call. Emma Zhao drove the rest of the way to her penthouse apartment in a daze, replaying the encounter in her mind. At 32, she had grown accustomed to people treating her differently once they discovered she was the CEO of Zhao Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Men either became intimidated by her success or saw her as a trophy to be won. But Jack hadn't known any of that. He had just been a kind stranger helping someone in need, expecting nothing in return. The genuineness of the interaction was so refreshing, it almost made her emotional. As she rode the private elevator to her penthouse, Emma found herself looking at Jack's number in her phone. His hands had been rough with calluses, his clothes well-worn. He was nothing like the polished executives and entrepreneurs who usually populated her world. And yet, there had been something in his eyes, a depth of character, a quiet dignity despite his obvious struggles. She found herself wondering about his daughter, about the life they led. Before she could talk herself out of it, Emma typed a message. "This is Emma from the roadside rescue. Just wanted to say thanks again, and that I made it home safely. I'm serious about that coffee." She hesitated before hitting send, then took a deep breath and pressed the button. Jack had just tucked Sophie back into her bed at their small two-bedroom apartment when his phone buzzed. Reading Emma's message, he couldn't help but smile. "Who's that, Daddy?" Sophie asked sleepily, her blonde curls splayed across her pillow. "Just someone I helped tonight, sweetie," Jack replied, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "Was it a princess?" Sophie asked, her imagination always active even when half asleep. Jack chuckled. "Not exactly, but she did have a fancy car." "That's close enough," Sophie mumbled as she drifted back to sleep. Jack typed back, "Glad you made it home safe. Coffee sounds great." "I'm free Saturday morning if that works for you." The response came almost immediately. "Saturday at 10, beans and books. See you there." Jack set his phone down, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety settling in his stomach. He hadn't been on a date in years, and he wasn't sure if this even counted as one. Whatever it was, it felt like a bright spot in his otherwise challenging life. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies, a stark contrast to the stormy night when they'd met. Jack had asked Mrs. Henderson to watch Sophie for a couple hours, promising to be back by noon for Sophie's soccer practice. "Daddy, why are you wearing your church shirt?" Sophie asked as Jack fumbled with the buttons of his one decent button down. "I'm meeting a new friend for coffee," he explained, trying to sound casual. Sophie's eyes lit up. "The princess with the fancy car," Jack laughed, kneeling down to her level. "She's not a princess, Soph. Her name is Emma, and she's just someone I helped when her car broke down." "Is she pretty?" Jack hesitated. "Yes, she is, but remember what we talked about. What's more important than being pretty?" Sophie puffed out her chest proudly. "Being kind and smart." "That's my girl," Jack said, giving her a high five. "Now be good for Mrs. Henderson, okay? I won't be gone long." Sophie nodded seriously. "Can I meet her someday? Your new friend?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, kiddo. It's just coffee." But as Jack walked the 6 blocks to beans and books, saving the gas money, he realized he was more nervous than he cared to admit. What did he have to offer someone like Emma? Their worlds couldn't be more different. When he arrived, he spotted her immediately. Emma was seated by the window, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, a far cry from the soaked business suit he'd seen her in. Without the rain and darkness obscuring his view, Jack was struck anew by her beauty. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and when she looked up and saw him, her smile was warm and genuine. "You made it," she said as he approached the table. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Jack asked, sliding into the chair across from her. "I wasn't sure," Emma admitted. "I thought you might reconsider in the light of day." Jack raised an eyebrow. Funny, I was thinking the same about you. A barista appeared and Jack ordered a simple black coffee while Emma requested a latte. When Jack reached for his wallet, Emma gently touched his hand. "This was my thank you, remember?" she said. Jack reluctantly agreed, though it felt strange to him. He'd always been the provider, even when it stretched him thin. Once they were alone again, an awkward silence fell between them. They were strangers, after all, connected only by a chance encounter on a rainy night. So, they both said simultaneously, then laughed, breaking the tension. "You first," Emma insisted. Jack hesitated. "I guess I'm curious what you do." "Not many people are out driving that late in business clothes." Emma took a sip of her latte, choosing her words carefully. "I was coming back from a business trip. I work in technology." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. Emma had learned over the years to be cautious about revealing her position too early. Too many relationships had been tainted by her status and wealth. "Technology, that explains the fancy car," Jack said with a good-natured smile. "I'm more of a hands-on guy myself. Construction during the day, bartending at night. And raising a daughter in between," Emma added. "That can't be easy." Jack's expression softened at the mention of Sophie. "It's not, but it's worth it. Her mom left when she was 3, decided family life wasn't for her. It's been just the two of us since then." "I'm sorry," Emma said sincerely. "That must have been difficult." Jack shrugged, but Emma could see the pain behind his casual demeanor. "We manage. Sophie's an amazing kid, resilient, you know. Kids adapt better than adults sometimes." "What's she like?" Emma asked, genuinely interested. The question opened a floodgate. Jack's entire demeanor transformed as he spoke about Sophie, her love for soccer and space, her precocious questions that sometimes left him scrambling for answers, her kindness to other kids at school. As he spoke, Emma found herself captivated not just by the stories, but by Jack himself, the obvious love and pride that animated his features, the way he prioritized his daughter above everything else. "Sorry," Jack said finally, catching himself. "I tend to go on about her." "Your coffee's probably cold by now." "Don't apologize," Emma said warmly. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk so lovingly about their child. Too many people I know see their kids as accessories or obligations." The conversation flowed more easily after that. They discovered shared interests in hiking and old movies. Jack made her laugh with stories from his bartending job, and Emma shared sanitized anecdotes from her business trips, careful to omit details that might reveal her position. Before Jack knew it, he checked his watch and realized they'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. "I hate to cut this short," he said regretfully, "but I promised Sophie I'd take her to soccer practice at noon." "Of course," Emma said, gathering her things. "This was really nice, Jack." "It was," he agreed, surprised by how much he meant it. "Maybe we could do it again sometime." "I'd like that," Emma said, and the sincerity in her voice gave Jack a surge of confidence. "How about dinner next weekend? Nothing fancy, but there's this great little Italian place Sophie and I love." "She's been asking to meet my princess friend," her words, not mine, he added quickly, his cheeks reddening slightly. Emma laughed, charmed by his embarrassment. "Princess, that's a first, but yes, I'd love to meet Sophie. Dinner sounds perfect." As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Jack impulsively reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Thanks for the coffee." "Thanks for changing my tire," Emma replied with a smile. Jack walked home with a lightness in his step that had been absent for years. For the first time since his ex-wife had left, he felt a flicker of possibility, a chance at something more than just surviving day to day. What he didn't know was that Emma was experiencing a similar sensation. As she drove home in her Mercedes, with a properly replaced tire, she realized that their coffee date was the first time in years she'd felt truly seen, not as a CEO, not as a wealthy woman, but simply as herself. Over the next week, they texted regularly. Emma found herself looking forward to Jack's messages, often sent during his lunch break or late at night after his bartending shift. They were sometimes just simple check-ins, other times funny observations about his day. Unlike the carefully crafted emails and texts she received from colleagues and business associates, Jack's messages were refreshingly authentic. For Jack, The prospect of seeing Emma again brought both excitement and anxiety. As Saturday approached, he found himself worrying about the vast differences in their circumstances. The restaurant he'd suggested, Di Napoli's, was a neighborhood gem with checkered tablecloths and prices that wouldn't break his budget. But would it seem too modest to Emma? Sophie, meanwhile, had talked of nothing else all week but meeting Daddy's princess friend. She had even drawn a picture of what she imagined Emma looked like, complete with a tiara and glass slippers. "Sophie, honey," Jack had tried to explain, "Emma is just a regular person. She doesn't wear crowns or fancy dresses all the time." Sophie had looked at him skeptically. "But she has a fancy car, right?" "Yes, but then she's a princess," Sophie had declared with the unassailable logic of a 6-year-old. When Saturday evening arrived, Jack dressed Sophie in her favorite purple dress, combed her unruly curls, and gave her a serious talk about behavior. "Remember, be polite and don't ask too many questions all at once, okay?" "I know, Daddy," Sophie replied with exaggerated patience. "I'm not a baby." They arrived at Di Napoli's 10 minutes early. Jack had wanted to pick Emma up, but his car had been making an ominous noise and he couldn't afford a repair just yet, so they'd agreed to meet at the restaurant. "Is she here yet?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes as they entered the cozy restaurant with its red and white decor and the scent of garlic and tomato sauce filling the air. "Not yet, Soph. Let's get our table and wait for her." They had just settled into a booth when the door opened, and Emma walked in. Jack felt his breath catch. She was dressed simply in a sundress and cardigan, her hair loose around her shoulders, but to him, she looked more beautiful than any Hollywood star. Sophie's eyes widened as she spotted Emma. "She is a princess," she whispered loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear. Jack stood up, waving Emma over. "Hey there," he said, suddenly feeling awkward. "Emma, this is my daughter, Sophie. Sophie, this is my friend Emma." Sophie thrust out her hand formally, just as Jack had taught her. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Princess Emma." Emma's laugh was warm as she shook the little girl's hand. "The pleasure is all mine, Sophie, but I'm not a princess, I'm afraid." "You look like one," Sophie insisted, "and Daddy said you have a fancy car." "Well, I do have a nice car," Emma conceded, sliding into the booth beside Sophie. "But that doesn't make me a princess." "What does make someone a princess then?" Sophie asked, her forehead scrunched in genuine confusion. Emma considered this seriously. "I suppose being born into a royal family. Or marrying a prince." Sophie nodded, absorbing this information. "So you're not married to a prince, Sophie," Jack warned, embarrassed. "It's okay," Emma assured him before turning back to Sophie. "No, I'm not married to anyone, prince or otherwise." "Good," Sophie declared. "Because I think you should marry my daddy instead." Jack choked on his water, his face turning bright red. "Sophie, we don't say things like that." Emma, to her credit, took the comment in stride. "Your daddy and I are just getting to know each other as friends, Sophie. My friend Lily's mom married her friend, and now Lily has a new dad," Sophie explained matter-of-factly. "I already have a dad, but he could use a wife." "Okay, enough matchmaking," Jack said firmly, though he couldn't help but notice Emma seemed more amused than offended. "How about we look at the menu instead?" The evening progressed more smoothly from there. Sophie warmed up to Emma immediately, especially when Emma revealed she knew all about space, Sophie's current obsession. By the time their pasta arrived, Sophie was chattering away, telling Emma about her soccer team and her best friend Lily and the science experiment they'd done at school. Jack watched them interact, a strange feeling swelling in his chest. Emma listened to Sophie with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. She didn't talk down to her or dismiss her interests as cute but unimportant, as many adults did with children. "Your daughter is remarkable," Emma told Jack when Sophie excused herself to the restroom, accompanied by their waitress who had kindly offered to help. "She's so bright and curious." "She's my whole world," Jack said simply. Emma studied him for a moment. "You're doing an amazing job with her, Jack. That's evident in everything about her." "I don't know about that. I work too much. Our apartment is too small. I can't afford the fancy science camps her friends go to." Emma reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Those things don't matter as much as you think. What matters is that she feels loved and secure, and she clearly does. Jack looked down at their hands, then back up at Emma. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. When Sophie returned, they ordered cannoli for dessert, and Jack found himself relaxing fully for the first time in years. There was something about being with Emma that felt right, as if they'd known each other much longer than a week. After dinner, they walked to a nearby park, where Sophie insisted on showing Emma her cartwheels while the sun set in vibrant oranges and pinks. She's going to sleep well tonight, Jack commented as they watched Sophie racing around the playground. All this excitement has her wound up. She's wonderful, Emma said. You should be very proud. I am, Jack agreed. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, Listen, Emma, I've really enjoyed getting to know you these past couple weeks, but I feel like I should be upfront about something. Emma tensed slightly. What's that? My life is complicated. I'm always juggling work and Sophie, bills are always tight and I don't have much free time. I can't offer fancy restaurants or extravagant gifts, if that's going to be a problem. Jack, Emma interrupted, turning to face him fully. Do you think I care about any of that? Most people would, he said honestly. I'm not most people, Emma replied. And speaking of being upfront, there's something I need to tell you too. Jack's stomach tightened. Here it comes, he thought. She's already involved with someone else. Or moving away, or just not interested. I haven't been entirely honest about my job, Emma began, choosing her words carefully. I don't just work in technology. I'm actually the CEO of Zhao Innovations. Jack blinked, processing this information. The Zhao Innovations. The company that makes those smart home systems, Emma nodded, watching his reaction closely. Yes, I founded it 8 years ago. Wow, Jack said, trying to wrap his head around this revelation. That's impressive, but why didn't you mention it before? Because people treat me differently when they know, Emma explained. Men either become intimidated or start seeing dollar signs. I wanted you to get to know me, not my company or my bank account. Jack was quiet for a moment, thinking. I get that, I think. It's like how some people look at me and just see a struggling single dad, not the whole person. Exactly, Emma said, relief evident in her voice. Does it change things between us? Jack looked over at Sophie, who was now hanging upside down from the monkey bars. Then he looked back at Emma, really looked at her. Behind the successful businesswoman was someone who laughed at his jokes, who listened when he talked about his dreams, who treated his daughter with genuine kindness. No, he said finally. It doesn't change how I feel about you. Though it does explain the really nice car, he added with a smile. Emma laughed, the tension draining from her shoulders. So we're okay. We're more than okay, Jack assured her. Then, gathering his courage, he leaned in and kissed her gently. It was a brief kiss, sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Jack noticed Sophie watching them with a triumphant grin. See, she called out. I told you she should marry you. Both Jack and Emma burst out laughing, the moment of awkwardness completely dissolved. Your daughter is something else, Emma said fondly. Yeah, she is, Jack agreed. Fair warning, once she gets an idea in her head, she doesn't let it go easily. I'm starting to see that, Emma replied. But you know what? I kind of like her persistence. As the weeks turned to months, Emma became a regular fixture in Jack and Sophie's life. She joined them for movie nights in their small apartment, cheered at Sophie's soccer games, and even helped Jack when his car finally gave out completely, insisting on helping him find a reliable used model rather than pushing him to accept an expensive new one. Jack, for his part, was introduced to Emma's world gradually. He met her close friends, who were initially skeptical but won over by his unassuming nature and obvious devotion to both Emma and Sophie. He attended one of her company functions, uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, but standing proudly by her side. Their different financial situations caused occasional friction. Jack was fiercely independent, refusing most of Emma's offers to help with expenses. Emma had to learn to respect his pride while also finding ways to contribute that wouldn't make him feel like a charity case. It's not about the money, Emma, he explained one night after a particularly heated discussion about Sophie's education. It's about teaching her the value of things, of hard work. I understand that, Emma replied, but letting someone help doesn't diminish those values. It just means you're not alone anymore. Those words, "You're not alone anymore," resonated deeply with Jack. He had been carrying the weight of responsibility alone for so long that the idea of sharing it was both terrifying and exhilarating. 6 months after they met, Jack and Sophie moved into a slightly larger apartment. It was still modest by Emma's standards, but it was in a better school district for Sophie and had an extra bedroom that could double as a workspace for those evenings when Emma needed to work late but didn't want to be away from them. The transition wasn't without challenges. Sophie had questions about Emma's role in their lives. Jack had moments of insecurity about the disparity in their financial situations. And Emma had to learn to balance her demanding career with her growing commitment to Jack and Sophie. But through it all, the foundation they had built that rainy night, one based on genuine kindness and seeing beyond surface appearances, remained strong. 1 year to the day after Jack had changed Emma's tire in the pouring rain, he took her back to beans and books. Sophie was having a sleepover at Lily's house, giving them a rare evening alone. "Remember the first time we came here?" Emma asked as they settled into what had become their usual table by the window. "I was so nervous," Jack admitted. "I kept thinking you'd realize you were way out of my league." Emma smiled, reaching for his hand across the table. "And I kept thinking you'd discover I wasn't worth the trouble." "Funny how wrong we both were," Jack said, squeezing her hand. After they finished their coffee, Jack suggested a walk. It was a clear night, reminiscent of their first real date rather than the stormy night they'd met. As they reached the small park where Sophie had once shown off her cartwheels, Jack stopped. "Emma," he began, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "This past year has been the best of my life. You've brought so much joy to both Sophie and me. You've shown me what it means to truly be partners, equals, even when our circumstances are different." Emma felt her heart begin to race as Jack reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. "I don't have much to offer in terms of material things," he continued, opening a small velvet box to reveal a modest but beautiful ring. "But I promise to love you every day for the rest of our lives, to work through every challenge by your side, and to never take for granted the miracle of you stopping to help a struggling dad and his daughter find happiness again. Emma Zhao, will you marry me?" Tears filled Emma's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Jack, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to embrace her, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them together. She had spent years searching for genuine connection in a world where her wealth and position often created barriers. In the end, she had found it on a rainy roadside with a man whose riches were measured not in dollars, but in character and love. "Sophie is going to be insufferable when she finds out," Jack murmured against Emma's hair. "She'll take full credit for this, you know." Emma laughed through her tears. "She kind of deserves it. She saw what we had before we did." "Out of the mouths of babes," Jack agreed. "Speaking of which, how do you feel about having more kids someday?" Emma pulled back to look at him, her heart full. "I'd like that very much. A little boy with your kind eyes, maybe, or a little girl as brilliant as her mother," Jack suggested. As they walked hand in hand back toward home, their home, Emma reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A flat tire at midnight had led her to the love of her life, proof that sometimes breakdowns could lead to breakthroughs of the heart. And Jack, who had spent years thinking his struggling circumstances defined his worth, had discovered that the richest man in the world wasn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love to give and receive in return. 2 years later, as Jack and Emma welcomed their son James into the world with big sister Sophie proudly helping to hold the baby, the journey that had begun on that rainy night came full circle. Their family, like the tire Jack had fixed, had been made whole again, ready for whatever road lay ahead.